So I'm speaking to Thomas Heywood, who is the founder and CEO of WeEngage. WeEngage specializes in recruitment, and they have a very special emphasis on ethics. And I would like to ask you to introduce yourself for those who don't know you, and also introduce the company you are a founder or co-founder of.
Yeah, sure, no problems at all. So, good afternoon. My name is Tom Heywood, from an organization called WeEngage. So I'm the co-founder of our agency, and we are a specialist headhunting agency. That means that we help individuals in the software development world, whether they are front-end, back-end, software engineers, CTOs, or engineering managers, find new job opportunities here in the UK and in Germany and wider Europe. But we are slightly different, as you mentioned, compared to most agencies, as we're highly focused into two key areas. The first one being clean technology, which is all around sustainability. So we help organizations that are building products to reduce carbon emissions out the atmosphere and to make the world more sustainable, hire software engineers. And we also work with health technology businesses, which are organizations that build services or products to make healthcare more accessible to patients.
Um, yeah, and I'd just like to, before I ask you about what inspired you to start a business, I'd really like to ask you what advice you'd have for young people who've just recently graduated, because it's a tough job market out there. There's so much competition, so many people are getting first, so many people are getting tough graduate degrees.
Sure,
So many people have got a master's. There's so much stuff that's been done. They've been in societies, internships.
sure.
So yeah, what advice would you have for young
Sure.
aspiring?
There's also a lot of other people in the world that don't go down the university route, and I'm one of those people actually myself. I never actually went to university or college. So from high school, I set up businesses since then. So always had that kind of entrepreneurial streak. But in terms of advice, there's a number of different things that these people should and can be doing. And I think the biggest thing that these people should be doing, regardless of their education, even if they've been to university, done a PhD or a master's or a bachelor's, or they've just finished college, for example, in my opinion, I think everyone should be thinking about what is their own personal purpose, what are they interested in, and what is it that they actually want to achieve. I think it's a real process of really understanding what work means for you and what you actually want to achieve in your career. That might mean that you might have completed a master's in a subject. Realistically, you might not actually want to go and do that subject in a full-time career. Some people do that. But in terms of advice, I think it's really, really important to really sit down and think to yourself, what is it that I actually want to achieve? What am I here for on this planet? And um, what skills and abilities have I learned from my university days and my college days that I can apply to multiple the different industries? Because I think we spend so much time at work. We spend a lot of time at work. We really should be doing meaningful work, and we should be thinking about what we can do to impact other people's lives, for example.
And so that leads me to the next question. And I really like the part about where you talked about um, trying to make a positive impact. So what inspired you to start a business, and what kind of hiccups have you had along the way?
Sure. So it inspired me to start a business comes from probably my childhood more than anything. My parents have always been in business, so I've grown up for many, many, many years around people in my family life that had businesses. So I was very fortunate from that perspective. Not always positive business, right? My parents had many, many failures in their organization, but so many, many wins at the same time. And that really, really taught me as an individual that business is not always going to go right, and sometimes businesses will fail. And actually, the statistics say that businesses always, more fail than succeed. But it still didn't really deter me from starting a business, because for me, I really enjoy the creativity of business, and that means that it allows me to be very creative with my own thought process, and it allows me to kind of run with certain ideas that I think could be really, really interesting that maybe haven't been done before, or even ideas that have been done before, try and innovate and change them. And that for me is inspiring for myself personally, because I like to kind of challenge things and maybe change the way that something's been done before. So that kind of really inspired me in terms of, I think recruitment particularly needs to change quite a lot. If you speak to many people in the street, you speak to people generally, recruiters don't always have the most positive name, because they've had a bad experience, or they've worked, like you're smoking now, they've worked with a recruiter who's kind of ghosted them, or they've never heard back from. Um, I've worked in agencies in the past that have made tremendous efforts to change that, and I'll always be thankful for my previous time in my last companies that taught me kind of how to be a better recruiter and not to do things like that. But then we've kind of taken all those amazing attributes of those businesses and then applied that with a more purposeful recruitment agency that balances people, planet, and our environment over profit, for example, which is why we created WeEngage. In terms of hiccups, I think there's many, many hiccups that we face on a daily basis. I remember at the start we started the business with like, we never got funding, we never took investors on. We are completely self-funded, which I think is a massive achievement. But that also brings challenges at the same time, because that means that we need to innovate in a more cost-effective manner without losing quality. An example of that is when we first set up the business, the first hiccup we faced was we needed to spend €2,000 or £2,000 on a website. Um, we didn't have that money to put into a website, because the money that we had to set the business up was for us to live off ultimately. So if we didn't make any money, we could still afford rent, a roof over our heads, clothes, for example, food and water, and still live in central London. So the first hiccup we kind of faced was we don't have this money. Well, we kind of well, I looked at myself, I looked at my skills. I've been designing websites since I was 13, 14. I had my first website on WordPress when I was 13, I think. Um, so I brushed off those skills, and in the end, we actually built our own website to pretty high quality, I would say. It's not fantastic, and people who are sure listening to this podcast will find a few holes somewhere in it, I'm sure. But we made something that we were extremely proud of at the time, and it brings in customers for us. It ranks on Google, and the hiccups that we face, other hiccups that we face, we overcome them by being true to ourselves, but also thinking, we can get out of this. We just need to be a bit more innovative, or we need to think about the problem in a different way, and then we can overcome that.
Very interesting. So I really like the part about what you're talking about, keeping thinking about your values while you're working on uh, in recruitment.
Mhm.
So could you talk a bit about the triple bottom line and the other sort of practices that corporations and companies can incorporate in order to take into ethics or being environmentally friendly, etc., into account?
Yeah, sure. So many businesses, I think that exist today, are created purely for profit, realistically, and that is what business is about, right? Businesses are here to create products and services that they then sell to generate a profit, which then we get taxed on. We pass that to the government. We employ people, and businesses are fantastic from that perspective, because it then allows people to get work. It means that we can employ young people. We can upskill people. So business realistically is a fantastic platform. But I don't believe personally that enough businesses use their platform to the utmost. Business can be a huge platform for many different areas of the world, and I believe that businesses need to adapt to that and balance more than just profit. So WeEngage is all around also making sure that we take into a number of different things into consideration whilst we're doing our daily activities and building the business. The main one for us is our people. It's the people that work for us. It's the people that have joined our team. It's the people that will join our team, and it's about giving them a platform to advance their career. That might mean hiring someone who's quite junior and giving them a platform to create an incredible career in recruitment, for example. But it's also about the people in our local community, because our business is all around is around also supporting our candidates, for example. When we are sourcing our software engineers, we're looking for software engineers who are purpose driven or want to work for purpose driven organizations. And that's really important. But the third kind of element also around people is our local community. So what can we do as a business to support our local community? Is that supporting a youth club? Is that supporting a charity that's wanting to do a fundraise? Or is that a charity or a beach clean, for example, or picking up litter from a local park? And businesses have a really good platform to allow their people to actually, and allow the owners of that business and the people that run that business to actually have a force for good. And I think that's a massive thing that modern businesses should take into account. The second P in the triple bottom line is planet. Um, and every business creates some type of carbon emission. Doesn't matter what we do. Every time we make a cup of coffee, or we, in your case, create a server, or write a line of code, or even manufacture something, it creates some type of carbon emission. We should know what that means. What impact does our business have on the planet? And climate change is a big issue right now. We're seeing increased temperatures around the world. We're seeing rising sea levels. We're seeing ice caps are melting slowly and on our rising the sea levels. We're seeing more extreme weather. I'm sure everyone remembers that it was something like 40, 42 degrees in London a few weeks ago, which is kind of crazy. And should that really be happening? I believe not. I don't think that should be happening. But I believe that we have a fantastic platform as businesses to make a change and to become more environmentally friendly. But I don't believe that enough people right now are taking on that challenge, because they might not be too sure on what they can do to become more environmentally friendly.
All right. And what kind of so you sort of touched upon the impact, right? So what kind of um, firms have you worked with that have had a positive, you don't necessarily have to name any, but that have had a positive impact, and that have really, utilized some form of
Sure,
technology or something that has really helped people?
sure,
And it's not just a bunch of numbers on a screen. It's not, some theoretical abstract concept,
sure.
because a lot of people feel like their work isn't, doing anything. So do you have any examples?
Yeah, sure. So we work with an organization, and there's thousands of examples of businesses that are doing this. One in the forefront of our mind is actually a business very local to ourselves. They're one of our customers. They're not too far from Old Street, and they're an organization that is pretty close to my heart for many different reasons. And we take a lot of inspiration from this business in our business, because they really are a tech for good company. But I'll kind of hone in on the reasons why I believe that they've made a huge impact on our lives. And when I say our lives, I mean me and you and the people that are listening to this podcast. Um, they are an organization that helps the NHS communicate more clearly to patients in the UK. So they typically supply GP practices with more up to date software, so the GPs are able to communicate more clearly with their patients, but also allowing GPs to communicate more clearly between each other and for things like referrals. Typically, the NHS or GP practice can be very paper heavy. I'm sure we've all been there before, where we've been waiting for a referral for weeks, or we've been waiting for some documentation for weeks, or even simple things like calling the GP in the morning, trying to get an appointment when you're not feeling very well. There's one part of this the customer that I'm going to refer to now. There's one part of their business that really kind of pivoted what they do, and the impact they made at this time was at the start of the pandemic. GP practices kind of became non-existent at that time. On the first couple of weeks of the pandemic, there was no opportunity for us to go to the doctors that easily. The pandemic it was a really scary moment for everyone, I think. We didn't know what we were kind of walking into. I remember thinking this would be over in a week's time, and it really wasn't. It went on for quite some time. But the only thing that we had feeding us was kind of information from the news, and I think at the time we were seeing, unfortunately, the death toll was rising. We saw hospital admissions rising, um, but healthcare still needed to continue. People still had issues with their skin. People still had headaches. People still had illnesses that they needed advice on, even if it wasn't coronavirus. At that time, the GP network wasn't really set up for remote working. GPs rely heavily on visualization. They want to see the issue with your skin. They want to see how you're feeling. They might need to touch your arm or touch your hand, for example, or do an examination. But obviously, that wasn't really possible. This customer was able to get their entire engineering team together and working from home, strategize the way that we could communicate with our GPs whilst at home. And within the space of a couple of weeks, they probably had one of the world's first, if not the UK's first, video conferencing software built directly into their platform that GPs could use, meaning that they then could allow patients that were ill, people, elderly people, young people, anyone that had an illness that needed to be examined, were able to get access to that healthcare when they could not get access to it. Obviously, we see companies like Babylon, they've had video conferencing for years. You can download the Babylon app, you can see a doctor today. GP at hand is another one, fantastic service. You can book a GP appointment right instantly. They'll call me today. But people that don't have access to technology, or people that maybe aren't using these services, are reliant on the traditional GP methods. And the GPs didn't have the tools they needed. So this customer was able to build them in record speed, record breaking time, deploy them, and get them used in the GP practice. We've now seen that customer increase their market share in the GPs a significant amount. And they've gone on to build some incredible software that GPs use every single day, whether it's text messaging systems. Such a simple thing didn't really exist many years ago. A text message can be such a simple thing from your doctor. Easier referrals, building portals that you can log into, and ultimately giving the GPs back their time, um, reducing no-shows, all these different things that cost the NHS a lot of money.
Oh wow, that is absolutely amazing. Um, so yeah, now I would so just before we transition to asking some questions a bit about social issues, which you don't have to answer, by the way. I
Sure.
just want to say that's really, really amazing, and it kind of shows that you can work in any industry. It can be recruitment, it can be anything, and you can have a major positive impact, and have a very meaningful impact. So, yeah, I think that must have been something very meaningful for you to have a client like that and place
Yeah.
people there. And
And that's
then,
where we add the value to our candidates, because a lot of these people that we speak to on a daily basis, particularly from a candidate perspective, software engineers, for example, the way that recruitment works right now is the software engineers have been bombarded by many different headhunters, from emails, calls, LinkedIn messages, sometimes even Facebook. Some of my candidates told me they've been messaged on Facebook by recruiters, which is cool, right? But the they've been bombarded by these insurance firms, and they've been bombarded by the fastest food delivery company in the world, and organizations that are in stealth mode, for example, which is fine because these companies do add value to the world. Deliveroo, for example, does add value to the world. It allows us to, if we're sick, for example, order some food from Sainsbury's, or if we have a small baby at home. Deliveroo in the pandemic was a godsend for many people. But I think there's another level of impact that these software engineers can have. But unfortunately, they don't always get these opportunities readily in their inbox, and that's where we really come in to identify them, B, engage them, but then the bigger piece that we offer is the educational piece, because a lot of the software engineers we speak to don't realize these businesses exist. And particularly in the sustainability world, a lot of software engineers and the people we network with in terms of candidates don't realize the level of impact their code or their infrastructure can have on the planet and people's lives. And then we have a really, really interesting educational piece with these candidates, explaining to them what the customers do, how they can have impact. And that's why I believe that WeEngage is a recruitment agency at the forefront. We are a recruitment agency, but we are a really good, again, a platform to educate. Even if the software engineers that we activate and engage and network with aren't perfect for the position that we're recruiting for, let's say they're missing a couple of skills, we can still use that time to educate them about issues that happen in the world and how they can help solve some of those challenges.
That's yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. And yeah, so um yeah, like I stated, when it comes to these questions, you don't have to
Sure.
answer them, but
Try my hardest anyway.
yeah. So basically, I wanted to ask you a bit about sort of social inequality, right? So um I've had some really cool guests on, and for example, I said that, for example, I think that tech has a bit to do with it. He believed that money printing or the sort of central bank policies had a lot more to do with it. But what do you think about social inequality and the rising gap, not just between the incredibly wealthy, but also the upper middle class and the lower middle class? Because the middle sort of seems to be shrinking and getting smaller and smaller.
Mhm.
And then there's also cost of living crisis
Yeah.
that is causing quite a bit of social anxiety for people. So what's your view on that? And do you have any sort of thoughts on it, or policy positions or
Sure.
anything like that? Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. I think it's causing more than kind of social anxiety. I think the current cost of living crisis that we're currently in with rising gas prices and food prices, and we've seen, the market, the housing market is shifting. Mortgage rates are rising. I think it's causing more issues than what we see. I genuinely see it myself through our business and my own personal life, the cost of things increasing. But I do feel that there's millions and millions of people out there that are awake all night thinking about this type of stuff. Um, that have young children, that are single parents, for example, or elderly, or even like you mentioned, could be working in a job and earning good money. That you can still keep people awake at night. But I would have to agree. I think the gap is changing, and we've seen that with the kind of reverse recently on the higher tax rate. With the government reversing the higher tax rate that was, or the lower tax rate that was introduced last week. That's now been overturned, and they're no longer cutting the percentage from 45% to 40. It's now staying the same. I'm very pro business. Again, very. I think that again, business has a force for good. I think businesses can invest, we can innovate, we can invent, we can employ people. Um, but I think the government isn't doing enough right now to help the people that are maybe not able to work in these types of businesses, or these people that are really, really struggling right now. And I think that's something that needs to change quickly.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's very, very interesting. And um, so in terms of, again, like I said, you don't have to answer this question, but do you think spirituality has any form of role in the modern world where we have science and technology and physics and a much higher understanding of the world? Or do you think sort of spirituality is just a bunch of hocus pocus and it's just, random stuff that
Interesting.
doesn't add value?
Sure. No, interesting question. Myself, I'm not spiritual. Um, I my upbringing wasn't particularly spiritual, although we did go to church quite regularly, or we celebrate holidays, for example, which then people should say, well, if you're celebrating Christmas and all these other things, maybe you are thinking about spirituality or whatever it is. But in terms of kind of people believing, is there a God, for example, or should we pray, or whatever it is, I think it's on the individual. I think regardless of where the world is in technology or our understanding of the world or how the world was created, was it science? Was it something else? I think everyone should have something that they believe in, whether that's a god, like I mentioned, or spirituality, or even in themselves. Like what is, if I think everyone should have something that they believe in, and if that helps them achieve more through spirituality, going to church, for example, or whatever it is, for example, reading the Quran, for example, I think that's a good thing.
Interesting.
Definitely not against it, and I think it should. If I think it should be something that. Go on, sorry.
Yeah, I meant more like, okay, so you think basically on an individual basis it can provide values. Am I understanding that
Yeah,
correctly?
exactly. I think it can provide tremendous value to individuals. I really genuinely do, and I've had some friends in the past that, um, by being religious or by being spiritual, for example, has provided tremendous warmth, tremendous guidance. It's added a lot to their life, and if that helps them achieve their own personal goals and feel positive, then I think that's a good thing for them.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. And then in terms of sort of social media, again, like I said, you don't have to answer this, but do you think so? There are these views, like some controversies these days, where some people believe that social media companies should have the right to ban people from airing their views, and others believe that they should not. Um, and so, sort of, yeah. What do you think about that? Like, do, would that infringe upon free speech, or would it not? What do
I'm
you think? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not too sure where I sit on this, being serious. And I've recently read a lot about kind of the Elon Musk Twitter purchasing. That kind of fell out and it didn't happen. Now Twitter have taken Elon Musk to court to force him to buy their company. Um, and I think reading kind of what they were talking about and what Jack Dorsey was saying, who was the original founder or co-founder of Twitter, he thinks that Twitter should be a foundation and that it should be a free speech platform, and they should allow people to have a platform to communicate. I think we've seen it a lot with Facebook, and I think Donald Trump was kind of banned off all these different platforms, and he's no longer allowed on them. So he's now created his own social media platform, which I can't remember what it's called. I don't know if you
I
know,
don't know. Through
but
social
Truth,
truth.
Social Truth. Yeah, that was it.
Oh, truth social. I don't know.
True Social,
Something.
yeah, I think that's what it was, which is fantastic. And I think the idea of having Twitter as a foundation rather than on the stock exchange, for example, is interesting. But then, and I think people should have a platform to be able to have free speech. But then on the flip side, we've seen many problems in the world caused by people on social media, and we've seen a number of people in the world have challenges through social media. And where's the limit on free speech? Because you can say what you want, but then there always is a limit. No,
In terms
where
of hate speech, yes, yeah, there
where
is.
where is that limit, and who governs that on social media platforms?
Indeed, great question. Great question.
I do agree though that people on social media people should be verified. For example, though, I do think that there should not be Twitter bots and spam bots and these companies or these individuals put out hate speech. It's too easy to set up a Twitter account to put out hate speech or things like this, which they believe might be free speech. And I think an area of verification could definitely reduce that. But again, like I mentioned at the start, I'm still not sure where I sit on the fence of social media.
No, that's very fair. I mean, there are pros and cons and sort of it's a very complex issue, I would say. So yeah, it makes a lot of
Which
sense.
what's your opinion
Oh,
on
my
this?
opinion, very interesting. I normally don't share my opinions on the
Sorry.
but no, it's fair. You've asked me. Um, I think so. Of course, um, free speech, for example, has been enshrined within the constitutions of countries. And from my understanding, actually, I have actually read the book by Benjamin Franklin,
Yes.
An American Life. Very, very interesting book. And as far as I know, the initial concept of free speech was that the federal government of the United States, I don't know how it has been enshrined elsewhere, is that the federal government would not interfere with the speech of its citizens,
Hmm.
but actually it did allow the states to regulate speech initially.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then with time, and with as suffrage, by suffrage, I mean the people's ability to vote, sort of expanded. So initially it was only landowners of a particular status, and then eventually more and more people could vote, and then there were more and more movements to allow more free speech, and then eventually I believe that the state sort of took that away, and then it was sort of neither the states nor the federal government could interfere. So I think that the civil discourse is very, very important. So um, I believe that the founders of the United States of America assumed, had an assumption, yes, that people, of course, that there would be speech that is not very good, but there is an assumption, I believe, that people would engage in civil discourse, and their engagement would be in order to, the end of that discourse is to get closer to the truth, or to come towards an agreement or a compromise, or come up with a solution. So I think that it's very important. I'm not saying they should or should not have the right. I'm saying that people should remember the purpose that the founders had for enshrining free speech, right?
Hmm.
Is that it is that you engage in this. Of course, some people want to be polemicists, some people don't. But the idea is to come towards to better your understanding of things, to come to an agreement or to understand things or see a new perspective, and that people are engaging in good faith. So
Hmm.
that's sort of the
I think
assumption.
that's the key though
Yeah,
in good faith, I
yeah.
think.
So that is very, very important. So I'm not saying what should or should. I don't know what the right solution is to this, so I can't comment on it. But I think that this should be remembered when you think about um, all of this debate on free speech. Yeah.
Mhm. Interesting. Yeah, that's I agreed. We should. I think that's really interesting, actually, how you mentioned that we should look back what was originally discussed and what was originally set out to allow people to have that. Um, but people on social media can, like I mentioned, can it's too easy for them to set up these accounts sometimes. That we can't always control that. I don't know. It'd be an interesting to see how this plays out, though. So I do think that there will be room for more platforms that come out to allow more free speech on a social media platform, particularly if we see companies like Meta, for example, and Facebook kind of stopping figures like Donald Trump, for example, being on their platforms. Who's next, basically? Who else could it happen to?
Interesting. And my last question for you is, what do you think is the purpose of life?
Good question, particularly given that we discussed it at the start. The purpose of life, again, is I think subjective to each individual purpose in each individual person. But in my opinion, the purpose of life is to do something good that helps other people. And that it's different to every single person. It doesn't matter what it is. But I like the idea and definitely think about the idea of in many years' time being able to look back and say the purpose of my life was I was able to do XYZ for these people, or I was able to influence these people. And that could be from helping people with their careers, for example, or it could be inventing a product, for example, that saves millions of lives. But I think it's subjective to each individual. But I think the purpose of life is to support other people and help other people.
Oh, amazing, man. I'm really happy to hear that. So, Tom, that was a very, very interesting conversation. And I hope to have you on one day again.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
Yeah,
it. And thanks for the great questions as well.
yeah, thank you, thank you. And hopefully next time, we will make sure that all of the timing stuff has been set up properly, so I have the right questions as well.
You're all good.
Yeah.
You're all good.
Sounds-
Thanks.